I found out pretty quickly that depending on how much money someone is willing to pay, they can make their research say whatever they want it to say.
That's the difference between science and propaganda right there.
Yes, true. Very true. And, money is really making up the difference because research is incredibly hard to do. It's really hard to do good research and to do ethical research. And after working with, some of the tech giants of the world, some of the most revered universities, and kind of being disappointed about research and what it had become, I started to really question a lot of things. What I believed, what the 3-letter agencies were telling me was true, and the medical narrative in general. I became kind of disillusioned with research. And so I decided to dig in.
This is Spirit Gym. In today's episode, our host, Paul Chek, is talking with Julie Richards, aka the Crunchy Legal Lady, on the topic of facing reality together. This podcast would not be possible without you, our listeners, and also our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, and Organifi. Keep listening to this episode for special offers and discounts from our sponsors, or visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast.
Here she is, Julie Richards, the Crunchy Legal Lady, and get ready because she's a badass woman. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks so much, Paul. I'm excited to be here.
I was telling Angie and Penny, I said, this girl reminds me of me when I was younger. She's just full of fire, full of life.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I asked you why Crunchy Legal Lady. Tell us how that all came about.
Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't heard the term crunchy before, the term crunchy is kind of a popular term right now to describe somebody who's holistic, who's into natural health, who wants to live a more natural lifestyle. And the reason it's crunchy is like if you think of crunchy peanut butter, or crunchy goes against the grain. It's not smooth. You're not doing things the same way that everybody else is doing it. You're a little granola, you're a little crunchy. And for me, I have gone on a big journey with this. So actually, I came from a family that was very medicalized. We ate a regular Western diet. Everyone in my family is in the medical industry in some way or another. My mom's a nurse. And so my whole life, I grew up thinking I was going to become a doctor or do something in the medical profession. And then I went to school and I really fell in love with research. I loved everything about research. I thought research was going to help us change the world and that we were going to find out new things. I'm naturally very curious, so it was a great skill set for me. And after I graduated, I got swooped up by a multi-billion-dollar tech company to help run their research. So what I was doing was being a research consultant to high touch clients. So some of the people that I worked with, people like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, as well as Google, to help them create their research and then run the research project. So my job was to say, is this possible? Can we get these participants look at their research and say, is this, ethically sound? Is it well-grounded research? And then, begin that process. And what happened to me working for that company, and I just want to clarify, it's not just the company that I was working for. This is all research companies. But I began to see that a lot of the things that we were doing were not very ethical, in my opinion. They did not line up with what you would think scientific research should be, or, these scientific principles. I did have clients come to me and say things like, well, we need this certain result. We need to get this result.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I would say, no, that's not the way that research works. You don't need a certain result. You have a hypothesis, and then whatever result comes, right, you apply it to that hypothesis to see if it was right or wrong. And I found out pretty quickly that depending on how much money someone is willing to pay, they can make their research say whatever they want it to say. And
that's the difference between science and propaganda right there.
Yes, true. Very true. And, money is really making up the difference because research is incredibly hard to do. It's really hard to do good research and to do ethical research. And after working with, some of the tech giants of the world, some of the most revered universities, and kind of being disappointed about research and what it had become, I started to really question a lot of things. What I believed, what the 3-letter agencies were telling me was true, and the medical narrative in general. I became kind of disillusioned with research. And so I decided to dig in, and I dug in pretty hard. I started researching everything on, the so-called authorities, the experts, their websites, their studies. What did their studies look like? Are they really strong studies? Are they actually good studies? What do they actually say, what the CDC or the FDA purports that they say? And I really changed my understanding of science, and I became a lot more holistic because I personally felt that the backing to a lot of this medical stuff was not actually there. And so that led me to become crunchy. And with that, I felt really called to go to law school. And so I went to law school. I graduated this year and am soon to take the bar. And during that process, I was really lucky to have connected with some of the most prestigious medical freedom lawyers that there are, and to be able to work with people like RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his team, and Aaron Siri, and to be able to do research for them. And that's where my legal journey led me. Was I finally realized, hey, there's this big gap. There's this big gap between regular people and then these warriors who are fighting on the legal side. A lot of regular people don't know what they can do, how to do it, because we don't have a kind of basic knowledge of law in general. And so I decided, I want to bridge that gap. I want to help people learn how to navigate the law, what it's about, so that they can make changes and actually do something. And especially people like us who are more holistic and trying to help the world continue on that path.
Yes, and I forgot to mention, got so excited about just having you share that you also practice shamanism, you do energy work, you're an astrologer, you're a big fan of Rudolf Steiner's teachings, and you study his astrology system called astrosophy, which I think is just amazing because that kind of mind you don't find much in the lawyer dimension. Lawyers are usually very left brain, but you're also into a lot of real right brain technologies. So congratulations on having a whole brain to start off with.
Thank you.
It's a rare item these days. I'd love it if you could speak to the correlations between energy work, shamanism, astrology, numerology, tarot, human design, and the law, because you're into all those. I didn't mention numerology, but you're into that as well. And you know about human design, which is another astrology system.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you could say, on the one hand, all of these technologies, including law, were created by humans, right? You could say that. And I would say, some of the fundamental differences with law is that, kind of like you were talking about, law is really shared from the brain, right? It's all in our mind. It's about logic, it's legal. Not to say that emotions and perceptions or bias don't get mixed with the law. That's the point. Bias and perception is law in many ways because it is human and it's a human system. And, it's devoid of what the other systems have, right? These other ancient technologies like astrology, numerology, human design, they're also connected to the heart. They're connected to both. And they're also really connected to spirit and truth. And I see this as really interesting. You and I talked about podcast 250, right? The podcast that you did, talking a lot about entities like Jesus and Satan and Ahriman. And in many ways, I think the law is kind of what humans become when they're only in their brain, where they're only in that Ahriman kind of state.
Yeah, left brain, rational, very hard limitation, segregation.
Right. And these other technologies are the beautiful things that happen when we are and we do become whole brained. And they interrelate more than we think. Something important to note, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about what's coming in the future and what the stars and what everything else can show us. But one thing to note is that traditionally, especially in the US, but in most Western countries, astrology and those thought processes have been banned. They've been looked down on. And even recently, there have been stories of police officers going to someone who does astrology or tarot and saying, did you know there are these old laws on the books that say, I could arrest blessed you for doing this, for being an astrologer or something like that. And of course, with the Constitution and freedom of speech and freedom of religion, all of those kinds of things, those claims would never hold up in court. But I would say, as the wheel is turning, I would say spirituality has been turned up the last few years since Neptune entered Pisces. We have been seeing many, especially young people, getting into spiritual technologies and a lot of these ancient technologies resurfacing. And now we're getting to a point where Saturn is also in Pisces with Neptune, which is more of that law, that stark reality, that structure. And along with that, I do think that we're going to see some pushback, some of these laws. And so I think it's really important for people to know that freedom of religion is not just about, we talk so much about it in traditional organized religions such as Catholicism, but it actually applies to any kind of belief. In fact, the way the Supreme Court has defined religion is just a belief in a higher power, generally speaking, right? Something that you look up to. And so I do think sometimes in spiritual communities, they don't feel like they're as protected by the Constitution because they don't see themselves as religious per se. But I think it's important for people who are spiritual and don't have an organized religion to actually kind of lean on that part of the First Amendment, not only freedom of speech, but also to lean on freedom of religion. And actually, some of the headway that has been made recently to protect belief in general, I think is going to be really important in the upcoming years and what's happening to us and to our country in general. But I do think, the biggest thing about these two and how they connect is they both come from humankind. They both come from the brain, but one is coming from solely the mind and the other one is coming from spirit combined with the human mind, that whole brain perspective.
Enzymes are one of the most important things we can use to supplement our diet. Very few people have normal levels of digestive enzymes. It's extremely common to be digestive enzyme deficient because so many people are eating cooked foods, processed foods, packaged foods, etc. The best digestive enzymes I've ever found are Masszymes by Bioptimizers. And one of the things I like about them is not only are they the most advanced technology for how they're produced, the science behind them, but I take them on an empty stomach every morning and every night as proteolytic enzymes to help clean my body. So I've got Wade here, who's the formulator of these enzymes, to tell us how do they work as digestive and proteolytic enzymes, because today I think we really need to be supplementing with high quality enzymes. So Wade, what's unique about Masszymes?
Well, one of the interesting things is undigested protein is one of the biggest contaminants that cause problem for people, whether it's in their blood or inflammatory conditions or even impairing recovery. And it's quite common amongst athletes who have high protein diets, interesting enough, who are looking to add recovery, but they're not breaking down their protein effectively. And that was my case way back in the day as a former bodybuilding champion. So we set about cultivating and developing an enzyme formulation that handled all of the amino acids in a pH range from 2 to 12, as well as providing an assortment of assistant enzymes. In other words, it doesn't just break down protein, it handles carbohydrates, it handles fats, it handles fibers, a variety of different things, and they work synergistically together to make sure that you can break down just about any food and digest it properly. Now, when you talk about the difference between enzymes, there's digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Systemic enzymes such as like nattokinase or serrapeptase. Well, they don't help break down digestion, but they can break down inflammation or inflammatory conditions, undigested proteins, or scarring tissue inside the body. Well, it turns out when you take Masszymes on an empty stomach, it works exactly the same way. It will go into the bloodstream and now works as a systemic enzyme, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery times. Matt just tore his Achilles tendon and made a full recovery after surgery within a few weeks, which they expected for many months. He was taking as many as 100 a day. Now, I'm not suggesting people do that, but this was an extreme condition. And the bottom line is Masszymes is great for recovery, for cleaning up undigested proteins in the system, as well for digesting just about any meal. If this isn't the best digestive enzyme or systemic enzyme that you've ever taken, you get your money back. That's the Bioptimizer guarantee.
You can try Bioptimizer's math science at bioptimizers.com/living4D and get 10% off using the code Paul10. That's bioptimizers.com/living, the number 4 and the letter D, and the code is Paul10. Plus, Bioptimizers always have great bonuses and offers when you purchase multiple bottles. So make sure you check them out at bioptimizers.com/living4D and use the promo code Paul10 for your 10% discount.
The human mind is an interpretive interface. So we have to have a construct of ideas, concepts, and beliefs by which we interpret things. Religion's proof of that. Like here we have 3 monotheistic religions, Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, but their perceptions of what God wants and what God demands and what God is and the whole story is radically different in those religions, and that's why they're separate religions. So there you see that if we take God and we say God is a ubiquitous force, a creative force as a context, but here you can see people interpret that through their own framework of perception, which is based on belief. But the universe will exist with or without human beings. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what my shift in context in your comment is that human beings interpret everything through their psyche. If it's not in your psyche, then you don't know it exists. And what we interpret, as Jung and others showed very clearly, is we're basically working first at the level of archetypes. And then from archetypes, we get meaning through mental construct. So why I'm bringing this up is because I agree with you that humans are involved in this, but I think that the deeper truth is that human beings are doing their best to grapple with archetypal realities that ultimately emanate from eternity, from the timeless, not from the past or the future, because those are linear time concepts. We're dealing with God looking at itself as a concept, because there is nothing here but God, or there is no God. God is that for which there is no other. So God's got nothing to look at but itself. So God creates sentient beings and dreams them up and lives inside of them. And Julie looks at me and says, "Hey, Paul," and I look at Julie and say, "Hi, Julie." But the reality of it is what's looking through Julie's eyes is looking through my eyes, but we're just playing this amazing game of separation, which allows us to have love and relationship. And out of love and relationship comes mind, because you can't have mind without relationship. Everything you think about, you're in relationship with. If you say, "I'm a lawyer," then you're in relationship with law. So I agree that a human mind is involved in all this, but I think it's important to remember that astrology, numerology, the archetypes in tarot, they're actually deeper than the human being, because those constructs can actually be, for all we know, they can be used by an unknown number of other intelligent beings that are beyond our own development. In other words, we might not even know they're there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good distinction to make. And I think that's kind of when I say, the human plus spirit, right? It's you connecting to yourself, to source. And I would say those things like astrology and human design and tarot and all of those kinds of things are coming from that space of spirit, right? They're coming through and we use them in a human way. We're interpreting things, whereas the law, we're really interpreting using our mind. We're almost in our own, if you want to think about it like the Matrix, right? We're making up our own rules to our own game. And then we keep expanding the rules and changing the rules. And then we use our perception and mostly mind disconnected from our true selves, from true spirit, from source, to continue these perceptions in the name of oftentimes justice or of being fair-minded.
Yes. Are there other connections between energy, energy medicine, or the concept of subtle energy? Like, for example, how do you correlate tarot and shamanism to the law?
Yeah, I think both of those things are, I would similarly say those things, as we interpret things, right? As we're interpreting, what does the tarot mean, or as we're in a state of being a bridge, right? Like shaman means bridge, and we're trying to be a bridge. In the same way, a judge, when they're looking at things, that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to interpret what's in front of them and be a bridge to, what is justice, what is rightful in this case. Even though it's a disconnected way of doing it and doing it with the mind, with logic, right? They're doing it in the same way that when we look at the cards, or when we are being that bridge, we're trying to connect that person to a deeper meaning and looking at the meaning through our own lens. And that's what the law is doing. It's looking at things from a certain and particular lens, giving them definition, giving them interpretation. But I would love to touch on some of the things that we can do when we are connected, when we do know our rights. And some of the things to know is, like I said before, is even if you're not part of an organized religion, right? If you have any kind of practice where you have source or anything above you, you're entitled to all those protections, to all of your beliefs. And if you are being put upon to, let's say, the big thing we've seen during the pandemic, right, is that forced medications, a lot of force, you are just as allowed to use the protections of the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech to disentangle yourself from having to have these mandated, whatever is mandated, whatever medical provisions someone's trying to put on you. It's just to remember, like, this is another way that we can be able to keep our own sovereignty that we already have.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm really glad you shared that, because that had never crossed my mind before. Most of the religious exemption forms I've seen ask you what your religion is. So, what do you do if you don't have a religion? If you just put spirituality on there, my concern is, even though you're right, that somebody who, like, if you have to take that medical exemption, say, to an airport and
Mm-hmm.
try to get on an airplane, like during the pandemic, for
Mm-hmm.
example, and you wrote down spirituality is my religion, they might just say, well, that's bullshit. That's not a religion. And you end up having to hire a lawyer to spend a bunch of money. So how do you tackle the need for almost all these forms asking you to tell them what your religion is?
Right. I think the first step is always going to be, well, one thing would be, and I know this is really maybe counterintuitive. I think many people who are in the spiritual community balk at giving themselves any kind of name, right? Like, we don't
Uh-huh.
want to be defined. But I do think if you have some kind of definition or some kind of name for what you believe, I would use that. If you say, I believe in shamanism, right? That, I mean, people see that that's a real religion, even though, it doesn't encompass your whole belief. But that's not the point in this interaction, right? The point is, just declaring that you have a higher power that you answer to. And due to that, you are not going to, you're sovereign and you're not going to take any of these medications. So the first thing is, if you do have some kind of name for what you do, whether that be, I don't know, Zoroastrianism or, shamanism, whatever it is, some definition that can be useful. Something else, though, I would push back on is using the phrase, the Supreme Court has defined religion by the place parallel test, and therefore you cannot say that my religion is invalid.
There is something else I'll throw on the table, and you're welcome to share your thoughts on that. And that is that there is a church called the Unity Church, and there's also Baha'i, and those are considered legitimate churches and religions. And if one wanted to sidestep all the hassle, you could just say Baha'i Church or Unity Church, because those are churches that practice world religion. So they're not focused on any one religion. So if you wanted to just a catch term, you don't really have to say I'm a Christian or I practice Judaism or whatever. You could say Unity Church, because really the Unity Church and Baha'i, from my studies of them, are looking just for the beauty of all world religions. So it's kind of like, I'm not putting myself in any one box, but I think there's something beautiful in all of them. So let's just look for the beauty in all of them and make that our practice, which I think is, well, one is, it's not only important today in the world, but it's really, if you look at the structure of religions start off as egocentric. Somebody founded them, a person, but religions are generally ethnocentric, my belief against your belief, and religious wars are the number one cause of wars from my research. But then you go from egocentric to ethnocentric to world centric. So when a person's consciousness evolves from ego to ethno to world, they now see themselves as a citizen of the world. They don't see themselves as just part of these Christians or the sect of people. They realize that they're part of something much bigger, much more whole, and much more beautiful that doesn't require you to disagree with somebody who has a different religion. You see yourself as one with people, and you give them room to have their own beliefs and values. But then religion emerges to cosmocentric, which means you go beyond the world and you realize that you couldn't be here without the whole cosmos. So your next opening of consciousness is cosmocentric, which means I'm a citizen of all that is. And that's how consciousness, based on many researchers such as Gene Gebser, Arthur M. Young, Ken Wilber, many others, have all shown this structure is actually built into the psyche of a human being. And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And when is, it could be this lifetime and it could be 200 lifetimes. We all ultimately want to know where we came from. We have this deep inside of us. This is really, researchers show this is why we have this quest for God all the time, is we ultimately want to know where did we come from. Like a child that's orphaned lives this painful experience of always wanting to know who its mommy and daddy is. And when they find their mother and father, it's for the first time they feel complete and whole. This is just a side note, but I think it's important for two contexts, because with all the division being injected into culture right now and programmed into culture, it's important to remember that if you forget that Jesus said, love thy enemy as thyself, and you forget the golden rule that Confucius gave us, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you're immediately falling backward in the evolution of consciousness. You're reverting. It's like going from an adult to being a child because you've got Alzheimer's disease. And that's not the right formula for working together with all the issues that are coming at us, because the people that are trying to control us are highly egocentric. So from a psychological perspective, they're the most unevolved people on the planet. They just happen to have a lot of money. And the only way we can get around egocentric people is to circle them, have empathy and compassion for the fact that as powerful as they are, they're lost, broken children, and that we have to use our higher understanding and our greater level of empathy and compassion. If we can't elevate them and we can't support them in their healing, which is not likely, being common sense about it. But what we can do is we can simply stand up and say no. Hi, everybody. I sure hope you're enjoying the podcast. A couple of months ago, Organifi sent me a couple of bags of their new Shilajit gummies to sample, and I was blown away with how great they taste and how much my body loved them. Having used Shilajit paste for many years, I've never been a big fan of the taste of it, but when I tried Organifi's new Shilajit gummies, I was truly impressed. The texture and consistency of the gummies is excellent, and they have just enough natural sweetness to let me feel like I'm getting a lovely, healthy treat for both my mind and my body. Shilajit is a unique, potent mineral paste from the Himalayan mountains. It contains an abundance of trace minerals, antioxidants, organic acids, and nutrient-transporting compounds. It's been known throughout history to help boost vitality and strength. Just pop a couple gummies and chew, or suck on them slowly for a steady release of the delicious, earthly, but slightly sweet natural flavor. Your taste buds will enjoy the delicious treat while your body soaks up the massive amounts of feel-good nutrition. Rich in fulvic acid, humic acid, vitamins, enzymes, bioflavonoids, antioxidants, metabolites, and over 40 trace minerals, Shilajit gummies can help support energy production, support performance and recovery, support healthy muscles, promote collagen synthesis, support healthy hormone levels, increase cellular energy, decrease fatigue, and promote heart health. I absolutely love Organifi's Shilajit gummies and went through 2 bags in no time because my body craved them so much. I reached out to Organifi to get more right away, and I bet you will too. To get your 20% off for Living 4D listeners, on your Shilajit gummies, go to Organifi, Organifi.com/CHEK20. On checkout, use the promo code capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K, 20. That's Chek 20 on checkout to get your 20% discount on your awesome Shilajit gummies. I honestly love these things. I know you're going to be just amazed with how great they taste and how good they feel. The other comment I wanted to share is that, we're in a very patriarchal culture, which is, killing us. It's killing the planet. It's killing us. When you look at tarot, what would happen if we removed the Empress? We removed the High Priestess. We removed tarot number 8, Strength. If we removed all the women out of the tarot deck, what would happen to the archetypal congruence of tarot?
It wouldn't be there, right? You can't progress along the path, right? The fool's journey, like the fool can't actually take a full journey without those, because those feminine archetypes are some of the most important steps in that journey, that inner knowing, that inner knowledge. It is what it's kind of become, which is a lot just about who's more powerful, conquest, right? And I think about the Chariot, which does kind of have this egotistical flair to it, even though it is triumph. You can't even have the full Chariot, that full winning, if one of those Sphinx are gone. Like if you don't have both, then you can't fully go the full path.
Yeah, well, the Chariot really represents something much deeper than that. First of all, symbolically, the Chariot's a vehicle, and all vehicles represent love and relationship. So as soon as you see a vehicle in any archetypal system, you're dealing with a deeper meaning that has something to do with love and relationship. The two Sphinxes represent the masculine manifest aspects of consciousness. We could call it left brain. And the black Sphinx represents the feminine implicate order, in Boehm's language, the invisible realm of spirit. So the Chariot sits between the two Sphinxes, and the charioteer represents the Christ principle embodied. It represents the ability to hold these polarities in balance so that you, the charioteer, can get to your destination. And the Chariot's body armor is not battle armor, it's armor against one's own inner struggles to balance these forces of consciousness, which on one side could be Lucifer, be Yang, and Ahriman would be Yin in the Taoist conception or Chinese conception. So the whole point of the Chariot card is really to realize we have to balance these two forces in consciousness. What I'm trying to point out here, because you understand tarot, and I've talked about it a lot, and I don't know if you got to that part in the Lucifer Christ Ahriman podcast, but I talked quite a lot about the Chariot card because it is the representation of Christ embodied. The point I'm making is in tarot, the emperor has to have the empress. I'll give you an analogy. The emperor is sitting down at dinner with the empress, and he says, well, tomorrow I'm going to have to execute a man. And it's kind of sad because I hate to have to do this, but the guy's been caught stealing 3 times, and I've given him 2 warnings, and here he is doing it a 3rd time. And I really hate to have to execute this guy. And his wife says, I know exactly who that is. But what you don't seem to know is that his wife died 2 years ago. He's got 3 boys, and he cannot work anymore because someone has to take care of these 3 young kids, and they're starving. And every time he's been caught stealing, it's been caught stealing food because people will not support him. And the emperor looks at her with shock and amazement and says, oh my God, all I've ever heard is that he's a thief. I had no idea. The empress is the feminine connection of nurture, the feminine connection. When we raise children and when we protect nature, we have to clean, we have to feed, we have to nurture, and we have to protect. The emperor really is more of the protector, but it's the mother that does the cleaning. And in ancient times, the men would go hunting, but women prepared the food and the nurturing and the protecting. So you see how tarot has the clean, feed, nurture, and protect, the masculine and the feminine. Part of the problem that we have with law is so much of law is actually so male dominant, and it's so highly susceptible to being chopped and misinterpreted and manipulated, that we really need people, Julie, like you, that can bring the feminine element to law and to understanding things like what's going on in the world. Because if we don't get women on deck, like when I saw the initial speech by, I don't know her first name, Shanahan, the lady that's running with
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
RFK, I had tears coming out of my eyes. I'm like, we need this woman in the White House. Robert F. Kennedy is one of the most balanced, intelligent, capable men since JFK. That's the only comparison I have. But when I heard her speech, I thought that's the perfect compliment. There's the empress to the emperor. If we need that in the White House, don't you think we need that everywhere?
Well, definitely. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to make. The comparison was, you can't have the chariot, you can't have that full embodiment of Christ without both sphinxes, right? When you lose that black sphinx, you can't actually go anywhere and you can't be fully embodied. And the other thing is, then it becomes what I was trying to point out is then it becomes that ego and that kind of egoic sense. And I see this in all parts of life. We need women to be more embodied and pay attention and more of the feminine. I actually come from a faith tradition where I grew up believing in both a heavenly father and a heavenly mother. So I always had the idea of a feminine goddess or this, even though I would say, the faith tradition itself is very patriarchal, but even just that glimmer of the feminine and this idea that the feminine and the masculine complement each other, that they're so important, I think was really important to me succeeding in my life and seeing my full potential. And part of the reason that I decided to, have my children at home and actually without any medical people there, right? Like I had unassisted free births because I think women need to step outside and step into their own sovereignty. And if we're not paying attention to the system, if we're not influencing it and also taking back our own sovereignty, what belongs to us as literal veils in this life and creators, then we're not going to be able to make a difference, make the shift. We have to have women on board to really make this shift.
Yes, I didn't realize you were a mother. I'm great. That's even better to hear because I think more women can connect to you because before a woman has a child, she really hasn't passed through her natural initiation into the depth of adulthood, of the responsibility of being aware of what's really important. It's no different for men. I mean, if a young man hasn't really worked through a legitimate initiation, he's still a boy. He's still a teenager. He's still susceptible to doing stupid things with guns, money, drugs, because there's not a sense of what's important and worth living for and worth dying for. So I'm grateful to hear that because being a mother has a radical way of extending the depth of one's perception of what's important. Unfortunately, as you're probably acutely aware, we have a crisis of parenting worldwide. And most people today, unfortunately, are babysitting their children with televisions and video games and letting them get their minds filled with crap because we don't really have a good system of education for parents. We don't have a good system of sex education. We don't have a good system of educating people on how to even be in a relationship. I mean, the average person today is married 3 times and the average marriage only lasts 3 years. Till death do you part, and the Christian vows are really not holding up very well, and 51% of married people are having an affair. We have to get more people that have really engaged the hero's journey and faced some real trials in life. And there's nothing more legitimate than giving birth. I mean, I don't need to explain that to you, but for any man that thinks, oh, it's just giving birth, well, then you need to pull your head out of your 4th point of contact because research shows most men would die in the childbirth process because our nervous systems could not handle the pain, and a woman's can.
The Chek Institute is thrilled to introduce the brand new 2nd edition of the highly acclaimed Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 1 online program, also known as HLC1. HLC1 has been at the forefront of holistic health education for decades, and now the online course has been extensively revamped for a brand new learning experience. This course covers all the important essentials for adopting a healthy, holistic lifestyle using the 6 Chek Foundation principles and the 4-doctor approach developed by Paul Chek. Whether you do this for yourself, your family, or to help your clients achieve their goals, this is a personalized approach to adopting a holistic lifestyle. The course guides you through from assessing where you are now and identifying your goals and motivation to showing you the most important steps you need to take and the order to take them as you progress along the path to optimal health and well-being. Presented by key members of the Chek faculty as well as Paul himself, HLC1 is all online, so you can learn at your own pace in your own space. Enroll now in the Chek Institute's Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 1 online program and take the first step towards becoming the healthiest version of yourself. Go to chek.group/HLC1 to learn more and register now. That's chek.group/HLC and the number 1.
When you look at the correlation between numerology and law, I study and practice numerology a lot, and it's a fascinating field of study. It's mind-boggling, really. It was Pythagoras that was really, I believe, the father of numerology. But when you look at what numerology is, each number, particularly in the Western system, 1 through 9, with 10 being the next level, is actually a field of value. If I say you've got $1 in your bank, that's a lot different than saying you've got 100,000. So if I say I've got 2 wives, that's a different field of value than having 1 wife.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers work objectively. We can count, that's objective, but they also have very strong subjective components to them. You know, if you say to most men, how many women would you like to make love to? 1, 2, or 3? Most would say, well, 3. Just because it's inherent in the male psyche to have variety and excitement. And it's like, yeah. But you see, there's an emotional component to that. It's not just 3, like 3. If I said, do you want 3 blow-up dolls or 1? Nobody would really give a shit because there's no emotional connection to a blow-up doll. But the point I'm making is that numerology, actually, each number is a field of value. And law is really a system of values.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And the reason I wanted to share that is because things like numerology and tarot, for most people, they're just airy-fairy hippie shit. David Bohm says, real thinking is hard work. That's why most people just rearrange their prejudices and call it thinking.
True.
And Carl Jung says something very similar. Jung says, real thinking is hard work. That's why most people judge. Instead of actually looking into something and really knowing something about it, they just make a snap decision, which is almost always what their parents believed or what their friends believe, or it's a cop-out on the work of real thinking. But anyhow, if you want to share anything else on the correlations between these just most amazing ancient systems, which obviously have tremendous value to human beings because they've been around forever. I mean, as if it was just a fad, it would have gone away a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. I think, in the way I practice numerology, I often use it as a timekeeping system in many ways, right? We live in 9-year cycles. We live in a spiral pattern as we slowly ascend, years 1 through 9. In the same way, law spirals. It's a spiral. There's layers and layers to it in multiple ways. One is that, thinking patterns and legal doctrines, they die out and they come back, right? These ideas, they spiral. But the other way that they spiral is, because law works off of precedent and stare decisis, which is that, you can't just stray away from what other judges have said about an issue. You are supposed to either distinguish it or build upon it. And you have to kind of keep with the law in that way. You can't just go off the rails and do whatever you want. But because of that, because it comes from precedent and we have this, because we're human and we have our own biases, we often will layer something new on top of it, right? We'll look at our situation. We'll say, well, this situation isn't the same as that judge's situation. And so I'm going to tweak the law just a little bit because I've distinguished it. and layer that, something else on top of it, and then I'll layer something else on top of it. I think, a great example of this is Graf v. de Joy. This is also a religion case, but it's about how do we define who is a boss? How do you decide who's a boss? How do you decide who's a decision maker? Which, it's funny because you would think, oh, that's super obvious, who the boss is. It's the one who makes decisions, the one who decides things. But,
It's the one that can fire you if you're confused.
Yes, it's the one who can fire you. But, over time, we've layered and layered so much of what is a manager, what does a boss mean, because
what is a man, what is a woman?
Right.
I mean, we're falling apart here.
Yes, we are. We're having a hard time. And, in Graf v. de Joy, we shifted our paradigm. Right before, the idea was, well, a boss is anyone who can make some kind of adverse action against you, like you said, like firing or demoting or transferring, something like that. And we're still saying that, but now it's whoever has the power, whoever's the decision maker, kind of at the top rather than at the bottom, if that makes sense. Because, in many companies and corporations, they have layers and layers of managers on managers on managers. And so then, who's the real manager? Well, it's the one who has the ultimate decision-making power. And so you just see these terms, we twist and we twist and we twist. And that's why that question, like, what is a woman, is so fascinating, because that's what the law does, right? It spirals and it spirals and it spirals. And whether it's an upward spiral, a downward spiral, east, west, you can decide for yourself. But the law is a constant spiral, just like numerology in our lives are in a constant spiral.
It's a really great point you're bringing up, because most people's conception of the law is that it's like stone, or it's like Moses's tablets. It's written in stone. But it really isn't. I mean, and if anybody's ever demonstrated how manipulable the law is, well, it would be Donald Trump and Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci and company. I mean, these guys toy with the law like they toy with people's lives and money. Part of the problem, it's as though some of these people have somehow managed to use money and power and whatever other tools they have to be outside of the law. And you're watching people completely and utterly abuse it and not be held accountable by the law. How do you feel about exactly what I'm talking about?
This has always been happening, but on a lower scale. In so many ways. And that is one of the biggest things that I saw in law school, studying the history of the law, and that's why I mentioned the spiral and the twist and the twist and the twist, is that, people don't want to follow laws that don't serve them, especially people in power. And over time, law has continually been twisted to give more power to people like three-letter agencies or the people at the top, the elite, who are allowing our borders to be flooded. We are seeing, the law being twisted, but at a much faster pace. I think the pandemic really, thinking about that spiral as like twisting a cap, twist, 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 we're seeing that come up more and more and more quickly. And so the intensity is amped up, right? Like we turn the volume up. And whenever you turn the volume up on something, it's going to bring out or try to bring out the extremities in all of us, right? Making us feel very extreme emotions, very intense emotions. And sometimes that can create on both sides rash action, also a lot of fear. And fear can push people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. But the hope is, on my end, in the beginning of the pandemic, and through a lot of it, I think I felt a lot of anger. I was very angry about everything that was happening, and I'm
Me
not.
too.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there's not still anger, or injustice, or
Well, you've had time to digest it,
right.
as a lot of us have. You in alchemy, you have to sit in the fire and cook with it. Jung says you got to hold the tension of the opposites, because if you react instead of responding, you almost always just take yourself into a deeper problem. I too have been digesting this and metabolizing it and helping a lot of other people do it, because that's what I do for a living, is I help people in crisis states. And a lot of us have been digesting this, but it hasn't made it easier. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, because of what you've oriented yourself to. Where has your digestive process brought you to now?
Right. And I was saying, in the beginning, feeling a lot of that anger and getting deeper and deeper into, well, what's going to a lot of the fear also, right? Like feeling some of that fear. And for me, the way it's kind of digested, because, when a lot of this started, I was in law school also. So there was a lot of, tension, and I felt like, so alone. Like everybody around me, no one around me was awake. And that's the way it felt. Everyone was wearing masks. You
Oh
can't see
God.
anybody's faces, and I felt like an outcast in many, many ways. But what that did for me was it created profound empathy in the end, an incredible, I think, in many ways, ability to sit with my emotions and the anger and the fear, and also sit with the emotions and anger of the fear of the other side, of other people, their feelings, and seeing that, being divided and us against them wasn't helping anything. It wasn't helping us get past anything. And the empathy turned into, this ability to love. And for me, what that ability to love, because my third child, my daughter, she was born at the end of my first year of law school. And after her birth, which was it was probably my most intense birth that I had. It was almost like, and I feel very close to Christ. I feel, I'm a follower of Christ. I feel very close to him, but also to Heavenly Mother and to the feminine. And I felt like this overwhelming feeling of love from source after that experience. And it didn't just extend to my daughter, it started to extend out to, everyone, to all the perspectives and all the feelings. And for me, what that kind of birthed was this I guess determination that, like, I will not let myself be overtaken again. I will not let myself be overtaken by the fear or the anger, or, and it's not that I won't feel those things. Like you said, it's important to be in the fire, but I will not let myself be so overtaken that I'm not willing to love again, that I will divide again. And because I felt like that's what I was doing, I was really dividing. I was alone and I saw myself as alone, but I really wasn't alone. And I set myself aside, and, kind of the egoic, like, well, I'm better than you all because I'm awake and you're not awake, and you are all falling for the system and I'm not, this kind of, I'm better than you, whether I really thought that or not. I think kind of in that consciousness. And that's how we can kind of get like, oh, I know more than you, I'm better than you because I'm on the true path, or whatever we may think. I see through the deception, to now feeling like I'm not going to let that overtake me, to see people as true human beings and true spirits, and part of me, right? Like we're all part of each other, and part of, the greater collective, and all as gods and goddesses, right? And once I could see that, for me, that this is, this project is what it's birth, that, we don't have to be divided, but that if we have the tools, we can unite and help other people. And like you said, hopefully surround those who are in that ego state, and learn to help them love themselves, right? Like help them turn inward, heal that inner child, to help people get beyond. That's my hopeful determination. Not that I don't get sad or angry or at all, but just that I don't want that to overtake me again, and rather use that fuel to create love, basically.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I am so excited to tell you about Wild Pasture's amazing meat delivery service. They have beef, chicken, pork, and wild caught fish. My family and I have been enjoying their meat for quite some time now, and I just couldn't wait to tell you about it any longer. We had an amazing barbecue this weekend, and I'm still high off the meat. And they use a whole network of regenerative farms, which means that you're getting a different ecosystem from each farm, which means a different nutritional profile, which means nutritional diversity, which means health and vitality, which is exactly what we need right now in the world for ourselves and our families, so we can all make a difference in the world. And Matt Smith's going to tell us more about this amazing company, Wild Pastures, about their offering and how you can get it. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much, Paul. And I'm excited to tell your listeners what they can get today and how we can help them out. So, as you know, pastured meats are crazy expensive. And so our goal with Wild Pastures is to tap into this network of regenerative farmers and to finally create the solution of where we can get the highest quality meats delivered straight to your door for the most affordable prices around. And so we're on average seeing that we are 40% cheaper than any other delivery option out there, and that our customers have reportedly saved, on average, $1,000 on their grocery bill from meat alone. And so Wild Pastures is a regenerative meat delivery service that is solving this problem. And you can get 100% grass-fed and finished, as well as pasture-raised pork and poultry and wild-caught seafood from Alaska delivered straight to your door. So it's far more convenient. It's far more environmentally friendly because we're using regenerative farms entirely. We don't use feedlots ever. So the nutrition profiles are way better. You can definitely taste the difference. I know we were talking about this on our just before we hopped on, you having a Father's Day barbecue and how incredible the pasture-raised chicken and beef short ribs were. And you can really taste the difference, right?
I'm still high.
And so our goal is to remove the roadblock from people's minds that if they want to eat healthy, it's too expensive. And so that's where Wild Pastures comes in, is we are delivering with our own fleets of trucks whenever possible. We haven't raised our meat prices in over 3 years at this point. And we're really just creating convenience for the consumer and kind of being the high tide that rises all ships. If we can opt more people into a system like this, the cost stays down for everybody. And so there is a myriad of benefits that go into that. And so today, if your listeners want to try Wild Pastures and taste the difference and experience what it's like, go to wildpastures.com/Paul Chek or click the link in the show notes and save 20% off for life, plus get free shipping for life, plus get $15 off your first box.
That's a mind-blowing deal. I can't even imagine. I mean, I've never heard of an offer like that. And, most people would hear an offer like that and think, this can't be that good. But I'm telling you, it's not only that good, it's really good. Or I would not be sharing this on my podcast. I think everybody needs to get a hold of Wild Pastures for their family, for their vitality, for their longevity, and for the future of this planet. So thank you guys very much. So Matt, just repeat the website again.
Sure. Just go to wildpastures.com/Paul Chek or visit the link in the show notes and get 20% off for life, plus free shipping for life, plus $15 off your first box so you can try it.
You'll be glad you did. The thing that I want to ask you, because this is a concern for me, is how do we protect people from falling into Stockholm syndrome? Because the real reality is they're going to try something like this or worse again. And if you understand what Stockholm syndrome is, we have to be careful because, for example, if they start knocking out the power grid or taking water supplies away or cutting off food supplies, which is another level of deep trauma, then people are highly susceptible to falling in love with their captors that have tortured them and made them prisoners, because that's just what Stockholm syndrome is. You start to actually bond with the people that are torturing you. And strangely enough, having looked at cases of Stockholm syndrome, they'll even try to protect them. And if we get to Stockholm syndrome, we've got a much bigger problem on our hands. So do you understand the nature of what I'm asking?
Yeah. I think there are two levels to this question, right? There's a more practicable level of, what can we do? And that, in my opinion, lies in helping people become sovereign for themselves, right? And that can mean, learning how to grow things from the ground again, reconnecting to nature in that way, learning more and having more of a knowledge of law and legal principles and your rights, right? Because all that is going to be helpful to protect yourself, as well as, there's big movements for moving off grid or homesteading. All that kind of stuff can be helpful. But I think there's also like a deeper spiritual level to it. And the deeper spiritual level is kind of what we were talking about before, which is about we have to reintroduce back the balance of the feminine and the intuition. We need the divine feminine to be back, because without that intuition, you will fall into it, because it is this state of, when I'm afraid, well, I'm going to disconnect from my emotions and I'm going to go to my brain, and my brain is telling me, oh, the government's going to save me. I'll protect the government. I'll follow the government. I'll listen to these people because they're going to save me. And if you're disconnected to your intuition and your inner feminine that allows you to say, no, 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 wait, that inner feminine, that is that intuition that will tell you somewhere deep inside, no, this is wrong. You are, sovereign unto yourself, and you don't need these people to take care of you. Those two spheres would be my answer. On the one hand, there is this physical sphere of, you need to learn your rights, right? Like, you have to learn your rights. You have to start being able to do some stuff by yourself and slowly become more detached from the system. Things you can do is you can join local co-ops, right, to get good food. You can, like farmmatch.com does a great job of putting you back into connection with food and the food system. Learning how to kind of get a little further off grid, more sovereignty in that way. But, on the spiritual dimension, it really is, we need to reintroduce the feminine. We need to strengthen the feminine portion of us.
And findaspring.com shows you how to find spring water all over the world. So that's a very important thing to keep in your hat as well. Food and water and communications are critical. Like when I was a paratrooper in battlefield strategies, they taught us the first thing you do to take over an enemy is you knock out their food supply and you knock out their communications. And we've already seen evidence. We know for sure they're knocking out communications. That's called censorship. That's exactly what it is. And we already know they're knocking out the food supply. They've burned down and exploded like something like 120 food factories and poisoning loads of food. I'm seeing report after report after report with, I won't go into it because it's not the point that we need to focus on right now. But when you look at what's going on, you need to know where water is, you need to know where food is, and you need to know water and food is that doesn't come through a supermarket, because the average supermarket, based on my research, only carries enough food for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're living in a city, you got 72 hours before all hell breaks loose. And, I keep telling people all the time, if there's one thing you should be doing right now, you should be making sure you have access to food, water, and you save enough food and water that's, has long shelf life to last you probably at least a month, I would recommend. And I don't, I'm not trying to scare people, but I'm a realist. I'm a trained soldier, and I'm a man, and I'm a father, and I have responsibility for my family. And I also too don't want to suffer unnecessarily. I'm not a teenager that's trying to, prove how long I can hold a cigarette on the back of my hand to impress my friends or anything stupid like that. We're in a world transition, and unfortunately, there is a battle of ideologies going on. It's a few against the many, and I think people need to remember there's apparently only about 185 of them, but there's almost 8 billion of us. I don't know what the total population count is right now, but if we just coordinate together, based on research that I've studied through Heart Math and the IONS Institute, 1 million people acting in harmony is more powerful than the rest of the world population acting out of harmony. So paradoxically, here's an analogy for that. Did you know that 160-watt light bulb, if you take the same light and the same amount of energy and put it into a coherent beam, a laser beam, it will cut steel?
That's fascinating.
Right? So the point is, the light bulb is the analogy for a bunch of people running around doing all sorts of shit, scared to death, not sure what to do, no connection, which is why we have to have tribes. We have to have people of value that we share values with. We have to create a field of value, as Mark Goffney says. That's our big problem right now. We lost our field of value, and we have to get clear on what's really important to all of us. Freedom, food, water, safety, having services that we can provide each other so we're less dependent on organizations that we can't trust. The more of us that align ourselves with values that are important to all of us, that don't require religious affiliation, that doesn't matter what race or color you are. We all need food. We all need water. We all need freedom. We all need each other. And so when we harmonize in a field of value, we are going to be unstoppable. There's just no way that these guys, no matter how much money they have or how many people they can brainwash, not even AI, because in fact, they're using our own data to train the AI that they are using to try to control us. So all we got to do is come into harmony and train the AI to support us, and they're screwed.
There you go. That's a great strategy because AI is going to become very important very, very soon.
Yeah. Well, we're at the end of our first hour, a little over for the free listeners, and I hope you guys have enjoyed Julie. Julie, I'm really impressed with you. You're a special woman. I've got to tell you.
Thank
I'm
you.
impressed. I'm a 62-year-old man, and I've had over 63,000 students come through my institute, and I've worked with many of the greatest minds in the world and athletes and movie stars. And it's so nice to come across a young woman who's really got both halves of her brain together and really stands up for what she believes in and is really working on solutions and is, you're obviously a tapped in woman. I mean, I'm not used to having conversations with people in your age group anymore that can be this deep and this honest, but this well connected to the deeper fabric of life. So I got to say, I'm very grateful for you and I'm very proud of you. And I really think from a spiritual level that you're really here to do big things in the world.
Thank you. I hope so. I'm trying. I know we talked about this, but my life path is 33, which is all about love. And so I don't know, maybe it's not my first time around. So maybe that's why I feel connected to this path.
Well,
now.
I'm more than sure it's not your first time around. I can promise you that. Yes. So anyhow, you guys, I hope you enjoyed the first hour. If you become a Spirit Gym podcast member, you can get the deeper cut and get the rest of the story. And believe me, Julie and I are just getting warmed up. You should see the list of topics we're going to get into. So you got a taste of her power and her beauty and her depth of wisdom. So you can sign up for the membership program, support the podcast, and go for the deeper dive. We'll be right back with round 2 with this amazing woman.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation between Paul and Julie talking about facing reality together. If you found value in today's show, there's more great content waiting for you in our special brand new Spirit Gym podcast membership. When you subscribe, you'll get access to exclusive extended episodes of Spirit Gym with Paul Chek, members-only Q&A opportunities with Paul, access to the podcast members forum within the Spirit Gym community where you can interact with other passionate listeners, and the opportunity to purchase exclusive Spirit Gym merchandise. Your support helps keep the show running and allows us to bring you even better content. So if you're ready to dive deeper and unlock all these amazing extras, head over to paulchek.com/podcast and become a Spirit Gym podcast member today. Visit Julie online at crunchylegallady.com, where she helps make the law simple for holistic families. For her astrological readings and other services, go to liarsage.co and make sure you mention that you heard her on Spirit Gym with Paul Chek for your 25% discount off her astrological readings. That's lylasage.co. Follow Julie on Instagram at crunchy.legal.lady and also at Liar Sage of the Stars, or email her directly at julie@crunchylegallady.com. If you're looking for any of the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit the show notes page at paulchek.com/podcast. You can also find details of the special offers from our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, and Organifi, as well as links to Paul's social media, his YouTube channels, and his blog. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.